Hey everybody, it's Robert coming to you with another adventure into history, and not good news today. I am standing in the middle of the Mahone-Ingram Cemetery. This cemetery began as burial ground for enslaved people from the Mahone and Ingram families and continued to be a burial ground for descendants of the Mahones and Ingrams and other local African American families. This cemetery has always been a favorite of mine. I have brought y'all out here several times before. The last video that I made out here was because somebody was destroying this cemetery by stealing trees out of here. The cemetery got hit hard by tree thieves, people coming out here and cutting the very old cedar trees that were intentionally planted in this cemetery. And these were very old cedar trees that were still growing, that it had been just amazing that they had grown so long in this cemetery. Well, after that initial discovery that this cemetery was being vandalized, of course, the local law enforcement was contacted to be aware of what was going on out here. I have permission to be on this cemetery, and we were contacted the property owner, which is a big which is a big corporation that owns a bunch of land for timber purposes. So we worked with everybody, and the vandalism out here actually stopped. We put up security cameras, and for about 6 months, 5 or 6 months, nothing happened at this place. There was no vandalism here. Well, I just happened to come out here the other day and discovered this. This was the massive old oak tree that had to have been close to 200 years old that was growing in the center of this cemetery. And it was an amazing tree that was still alive. It was a very, very old tree that had been planted here, and as you guys can see, it has now been cut down by the same timber thieves that we had the issue with before out here, where they are destroying and absolutely disrespecting this cemetery. The cedar trees that they cut were a massive loss out here. This tree being cut is even more of a massive loss out here. And I'm going to stand on the tree so you guys can see just how big it is. I think that this tree must have been nearly 200 years old. I tried counting the rings on it, but there's so many I lost count. But it's absolutely a shame that this has been cut down by these same vandals. But worse than just the loss of the tree is that they have dropped this tree on many, many graves of African Americans, people who were enslaved, and have now, damaged their final resting place. As you know, by watching these videos, these burials like this, the burials of the enslaved people, are often not marked with anything more than a fieldstone, and that's the case out here. So the fieldstones, they've already got very little marking, and dropping this tree on him has displaced a bunch of the fieldstones. Now, I actually came out here before when they had cut down and stolen all of these cedar trees and fixed some of the fieldstones that they had knocked over, and I'm going to show those to you in just a minute, because this is a pretty big operation. They cut down this very large tree, and then they are using a winch or something to pull this lumber out of the cemetery. And you can actually see that here, the drag marks where they've been dragging these trees out of the cemetery, dragging them over graves, displacing the fieldstones and damaging them. And here you can see some of the remains of the cedar trees that they cut down right there. And there, and there, and this is what was done before, where they were stealing these trees from out here. And you can just kind of see this trail of destruction going through here. And each one of these stumps was a cedar tree that belonged to the cemetery that was planted out here. Or it was, even if this particular cedar was not planted out here, it was a descendant of other cedar trees that were planted out here. And there's something that they left right there. Left a tape measure out here when they were out here. This is a freshly cut cedar here, though. I don't know where exactly they cut this one down from, but you can see they're out here cutting it. And if you saw the previous video that I did on this about 5 or 6 months ago, they were actually taking the time to not only cut the trees out here, but they were also milling them out here. They were cutting slabs out of the trees out here in the cemetery. And it's just absolutely terrible that they felt that they had that much ability to come out here, not only cut these trees down, but also, you know, start turning them into live edge slabs out here. It's theft from this property. They don't have permission to be here and take these trees to begin with, but it's also it's damaging stuff that belongs to this cemetery. As if you've watched these videos, you'll know that plants are very important to the cemetery. And one amazing thing about this one in particular was all of the tree growth here. This land had not been cut since the cemetery existed, which is probably dates back to the antebellum days. There's no really old growth in here except for this large oak tree that they just cut down and the old cedar trees. A lot of the other trees are younger, but they've provided this amazing shade up there, which has kept the undergrowth under these trees. It has not allowed the undergrowth under these trees to grow, which has allowed the cemetery to be shaded and stay very clean down here, so the graves were very visible. And now someone is damaging that feature of the cemetery by removing the trees, and it's an absolute shame. Now, again, you know, we can see all the drag marks where they're winching these trees out from here. Over here, there's a line of burials, and these are only marked with fieldstones. And this is something that I actually had to come here and fix last time. Not this one, but these over here. You can see this is a little row of children's graves right here. Right there, and before they'd been dragging trees through here and knocked over all of these headstones, and I set them back into place. And again, you know, you see this cut tree right here just dropped on the ground. That is a grave right there. You know, it's unmarked, but this used to be such a clean cemetery. It was one that we would consider an abandoned cemetery, in that no one was really actively coming out here and, you know, maintaining the cemetery, but it didn't need to be, because it had that shaded canopy that kept the growth down, and it was just very natural, very nice resting place. So coming in here and removing these trees and making a mess of it when it had been a clean, you know, sacred ground is just such a shame. And then they're destroying the markers of these people who didn't get much of a marker to begin with. And this is an example right here. You can see that they drug these trees through here. See my truck down there, and you can see the drag marks where they came out here dragging these trees through here, and that has displaced this fieldstone headstone right there, and I intend on fixing that one today. This one got broken right there. And then there's graves under here that have no doubt had their markers crushed by this tree falling on it, because it is no small tree. But it was alive. It was still growing and providing shade out here. And even if it wasn't, they had no right to come out here and cut it. This is stuff that was cut before that has died. And there is a grave right there. When I did this video before, I'd had, you know, people comment on the video and say, well, maybe they didn't know that it was a cemetery out there. Maybe they just need to be educated on that. And aside from the fact that they don't have permission to steal trees from this property, this is unmistakable as a cemetery, because even if you don't know what the fieldstones and the indentions in the ground mean, there are marked graves out here, like the grave of Jenny Horton here, who died in 1918 and has this beautiful MTA stone, which I'm going to come back out here and we're going to use D2 on this stone and get it cleaned up. This is a stone that thankfully was not damaged when they left this tree right here. This tree before was just hanging over this grave, and I guess a windstorm finally knocked it down, and it thankfully did not hit this headstone and destroy it. And over there, there's another unmarked grave. So I'm going to come out here and I'm going to attempt to try to fix some of this mess in this cemetery. Obviously, I'm not going to be capable of moving these big logs right there. That's going to take some heavy equipment to move. But some of the smaller stuff can be picked up and gotten back out of the cemetery. Today, I'm going to go ahead and reset this headstone. So let me get started on that. All right, so this headstone appears to have gone with this grave right here. Yeah, definitely did, because you can see the previous hole where this headstone was. This headstone was placed right here. And of course, now that it's been damaged by having a tree drug across it, it doesn't stand up anymore. So I'm going to try to fix that. I've got a shovel with me. And of course, I'm not digging down into the grave at all, but what I am going to do is just kind of sink this into the ground and just create a space again for this headstone. Just opening it up, opening the ground up a little bit right there, not going deep at all, just creating a space. We're going to pack that dirt back in there around this. And there we go. So we've at least got this marker saved here. This rock was broken right here. See, it used to go like that, something like that. But it was broken over by the tree falling on it. You can see the fresh break on it. And of course, there's this huge mess of all of this this wood that's been cut and laid everywhere out here, which is just terrible. And I wanted to show you this tree here, just how large it was. You can see what a large tree this used to be, which gives us some idea of age. In fact, if I come over here, right here beside this log, I think that also gives you an idea of how big this tree was. Now, one thing to note is this tree was hollow on the inside. You can see that, but that doesn't mean it needed to come down. It didn't need to be cut down. This tree was standing true. It had solid wood all the way around it. And I've known of many trees that were hollow on the inside that have stood for many, many years. And this one still had lots of life in it and was just an amazing, almost what you'd call an iconic tree in the middle of the cemetery. To have such a big tree here and to see it like this just makes me unbelievably mad. Of course, we have put out more surveillance out here again, and so it's back under surveillance. We're going to keep an eye on it, and like I said, I hope to work on this cemetery over the next week or so and try to clean out as much of these trees as possible. Another thing that I'd like to point out is if I walk over here, you can see some of this stuff that they have set aside to come back and get. And that's these pieces here, which are sides of these hollow trees. Sides of these hollow trees, because that's, big, and people who like woodwork, like that sort of thing, like the live edge kind of thing too. So it's someone like that that's doing it. We've definitely got some clues as to who's out here doing this. Someone is specifically targeting this cemetery too, and this cemetery does not need to be damaged any further, and we're going to try our best to prevent that from happening. But this is also a warning for all of the other cemeteries around this area that have trees like this that we have to keep a vigilant eye on now, so this does not turn into a serial occurrence. And I believe that it's somebody that lives nearby that specifically knows, you know, about this area, has specifically seen the trees in here. So today I'm going to try to clean up Miss Jenny Horton's stone here with some D2 that should bring it back to what it originally looked like, which would be this color down here. As you can see, there's a lot of icky stuff growing on this stone, and a lot of this stuff actually will damage the stone eventually because these are little microbes that actually eat away at the stone here. Plus we've got some of this mossy stuff growing on here as well. This is also an MTA stone, which is a very special stone. It's Mosaic Templars of America. It has 3 V's down at the bottom. The Mosaic Templars of America was a organization created by freed slaves after the Civil War to help African Americans. And one of the benefits of it was essentially like a life insurance policy that provided a headstone upon death. And so that's what we see that Miss Jenny Horton has here. And Mosaic Templars had various different, I guess, offices, or maybe you'd consider it like a lodge like the Masons have. Although they called it chambers. And this one came from Mahone's Delight Chamber, which was in Waverly Hall, Georgia. Now I know of several of these. Like I said, they're very special stones. In fact, I was actually contacted by the Mosaic Templars of America Museum, which is in Arkansas, if I believe, because they're doing a GPS log of where all of these stones are located. So I provided them with some GPS coordinates for several of these stones. And they are definitely a really unique piece of African American history, especially in the days after the Civil War. So always very amazing to see one. Like I said, I do know where several of them are, including the grave of Samantha Street, or as she was affectionately known as Aunt Samanthy, over in Waverly Hall, Georgia. And I also cleaned up her stone, and it looks absolutely amazing today after the D2 treatment. So that's another one that's local nearby that's also a Mosaic Templars. So I can't wait to see this one clean as well. I'm also hoping that it will also show that the cemetery is being cared for, people are looking after it, and will help prevent the kind of destruction that we see all around this headstone. So let me go grab that stuff and we'll get started. So it is an absolutely beautiful day here in Georgia today, and this cemetery is exceptionally beautiful at this time of day with the sun coming in. Although, as I explained on a previous video, the cemetery used to be heavily shaded with all of the tree growth, some of which has been cut down now. And that heavy shading helped keep some of the overgrowth down under the trees from growing up too much, and has always left this very nice and open underneath and created a really beautiful cemetery. But without the trees here, and of course there's no leaves on the trees right now, we get a lot of sun here, and it's just absolutely beautiful. So I'm just going to gently wipe off this stone, kind of knock off the loose stuff. And then I do have a bottle of D2 here, and also just a small bottle of water, small pump bottle of water. So before we put any D2 on it, I'm just going to go ahead and spray it down with this water real quick and give it another wipe off, just a pre-cleaning before we put the D2 on it. And when we put the D2 on it, you'll see the stone start to turn kind of a pink color almost. And that's the D2 working and pulling out these impurities in the stone, the dirts in the stone, and the biological life that's growing on the stone. D2 is the only headstone cleaner that's recognized as being completely safe for headstones by most preservationists. We don't ever want to do any harm when coming to a cemetery. We only ever want to leave it better than we found it. So that's why I stick with this. It's a biological solution, and it also keeps cleaning. It works with the weather to kind of keep cleaning the stone. There's several different ways you can use this D2. You can either just spray it on there and forget it, and it'll slowly start working on cleaning the stone, and again, it'll work with nature, it'll work with rain to clean the stone. You can also speed up the cleaning process a little bit by using a brush and just kind of, you know, washing the stone with the D2, the brush, and the water. So I've just sprayed it a little bit on there just to kind of give you an example of how the stones already starts cleaning up. But we're going to go ahead and let the D2 just sit on this stone for a minute. Just start working on it, and then we'll come back with the brush and the water and brush it off and really start cleaning it up. It's actually really amazing to see already the change in the stone as it's washing this stuff off. So while that's happening, I'm going to go ahead and move this tree that's behind this stone. I'm going to take the wood from this and just throw it over on the edge of the cemetery boundary there to get it out of this area. This is another tree that was cut down by the people who are vandalizing this place. Okay, so that's a little bit better with some of the trees that have been cut around this headstone gone. I'm going to give it another D2 spray. I'm going to go ahead and hit it with the brush. This D2 is expensive stuff, so I'll use it relatively sparingly. So just brush it, and we're being gentle brushing it, not using, you know, really firm strokes of the brush, just kind of running it back and forth. And we're going to hit it with the water now. You can see the stone kind of changing color there, and this is D2 working. But maybe a little bit before we actually get that really, wow, it looks brand new again. But look at that. And I don't have a whole lot of water with me today, so just what's in here is obviously not a source of water out here. But look at that. Already coming back. All right, so I've given it another brushing down with more D2 on it, so I'm just going to let it sit again, and then we'll come back after it sat for a few minutes, give it another rinse and brushing, and then when we leave, we'll just spray it down with the D2 again and let it keep working on it. But already, Miss Jenny Horton's stone is looking better. So while that soaks on there, I'm going to try to clean up some of this stuff over here because this is covering a lot of graves over here. You can see there's a headstone right there. That's a grave. And then I guess this is a small child here with a headstone there and a footstone. And then there's others beside Jenny over there, and graves all throughout here now under that tree. So I'm going to try to get some of this moved. It's getting hot out here. So clearing this off uncovered this grave right here. There is that would be the headstone right there. And then the footstone is right here. So we've got that grave uncovered. I don't visibly see one under here, but I mean, you can see what's under there. I don't see a stone though. And as we've seen in these cemeteries, we know how tight these graves usually are. There's also another headstone in there. And I know for a fact that there are headstones that are under the big part of the tree there that hopefully haven't been completely destroyed. So I'm going to walk over this way where I've been throwing all of this wood just on the outside of the cemetery. There are no graves out there, but there is a grave right there. That's kind of hard to see. I didn't see it at first, but I've been throwing the junk wood over there on the outskirts of the cemetery. But this tree here was cut by the tree thieves, and obviously I didn't just drag this over here. And I want to show you something. This is one that they've staged, that they're planning on coming back and getting. And I kind of wanted to show you how they were doing that, where they have cut this tree, they've cut the bad part of the trunk off and cut this cedar log right here to shape. And then the stuff that they didn't want up there, they cut off. And they've just got it left there, like I said, to stage this cedar tree. And obviously we want them to stop coming in here and cutting trees down, but I don't want them taking anything else out of the cemetery. I don't want these people making any more profit off of the destruction of the cemetery. So I'm going to try to move that they've staged there and put it over where I'm piling all this stuff and just try to bury it with all this that I'm dragging over there. That way it makes it as hard as possible to get to. All right, let's see if I can move this log. I don't really want to use my chainsaw on it because, might not be able to do that after all. That's a heavy piece of cedar there. Well, who was it that said if they had a lever, they could move something no matter how big it was? They could move the world if they had a lever. Who said that? I need a big lever. Yeah, I can't move that, unfortunately. And that shows the kind of size of this operation that they have here, where they're dragging these trees out of this cemetery, because this is not a light piece of wood at all. It would take a couple guys to drag this out. And of course, they're just skidding them out through the cemetery. I don't want to run the battery down all the way on my saw, so I don't want to cut this one yet. But I think that anything that they can still use out here should be destroyed, so they're not able to take it. And this should, rest in peace in the cemetery, or rest in pieces as they've cut it up. So we may come back to that. It was just a thought. All right, so I'm going to come back over here to Miss Jenny's stone and spray it down again with the D2, and then we're going to use the brush on it again. I'm just going to use this as an opportunity to cool down as well, because it is a beautiful February day here in Georgia. It's also hot. I'm sweating quite a bit. All right, let's get our pump sprayer with the water. A lot of this stone is going to take some time for this D2 to really work on it before it starts looking brand new, but it will look brand new. It's funny how the mind plays tricks on you. I'm not even slightly spooked of being alone in this cemetery, but I am on high alert, because the people that are coming in here vandalizing this place, there's no telling what someone like that could be capable of. So I'm on high alert, keeping an eye on my surroundings. And every now and again, especially looking back that way towards the other part of the cemetery, I will catch a glimpse of someone standing there. And it's obviously not. It's a trick of the eye, because I'm just on high alert and keeping an eye on my surroundings. But stuff will make you spooky if you think about it too much. All right, Miss Jenny. Her stone is going to need to just sit with this D2 on it for a bit, for a couple weeks at least. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and just give it another coating of D2, and this will be close to our final coat. I'm not going to brush it anymore today. Let me get all the sides of it, the base of it as much as we can, and the back of it too. Okay, just give it a good soaking down, and we'll let it sit for a while and really let that D2 start working on it, and you'll be amazed, like I said, how the stone looks after that. All right, so I've discovered a few more graves throughout here. This is a fieldstone grave marker right here, and it looks like it was relatively recently broken. See the break at the bottom there? So I'm gonna have to try and locate right here. Right here, look. This is broken. Yep. This is broken right here. This is a grave marker. Okay, so it goes right here. That's the footstone for it. More broken pieces of it. I knew there were graves under here. Yeah, and it's broken. There's the hole where it goes. So I'm gonna have to reset that one. So this is the footstone. This is the footstone for that one. More than likely. There it is. All right, so at least we found it. At least we found it. I knew there were some under this. I just hadn't seen them yet. Okay. Also found a grave back here. Right here behind the cedar tree is a fieldstone marker. And there was another one I thought, but maybe not. Oh yeah, right there. Right there, there's another one. These must be pretty old graves back here. Oh, there's one under there too. I knew this area was filled up with graves. I just had a hard time seeing them. See, under there, you might be able to see it on camera, there's a white rock. These could be some of the older graves too, because if these ever had indentions, they've filled in and they're not readily visible. Assuming these are the headstones and not the footstones too. All I see is one rock here. And we've got that rock that I believe is a footstone for the other one. But you know, it could have been displaced too, knocked out of where it goes with all of this destruction. And how about this fieldstone right here? That's just a beautiful example of a fieldstone marker right there. And a fragile one too, with how thin it is. So I'm glad it didn't get broken. And again, oh man, there's graves all under there too. All right. Well, again, at least we found this one. And we're able to place that back up. I'll actually use the shovel and make sure it's actually really placed in the ground because it's loose right now. Keep all the broken pieces with it. I'll come back and do that. So let me see if I can get a little bit more of this stuff removed from here. I do have a grave right there. I could have pointed that one out earlier. I don't remember, but such a shame. This is just bad and shameful. You know, the thing is the people who did this, they have no remorse. You know, they've continued to come back. 5 months later, they came back. They're sleeping fine, destroying a cemetery. It's just, that is a terrible person. All right, so more of this cleared, but still a whole lot to go over here. I think I'm going to jump back over here behind Jenny Horton's grave though and try to get those trees on out of here. This was, or that was last year's damage. They cut down these trees last year, and that, you know, mess has still been here. But there's graves all under those too, so I need to go ahead and take care of that. And it probably won't pick up on my microphone, but far in the distance I can hear the sound of a logging operation. It sounds like a professional logging operation. This is just some guys with some big chainsaws out here. But it makes me think there's another cemetery that's pretty close to here that I also need to check on today. So we may clean this up and then go check on it too. Okay, that's a little bit better there. So I'd wondered why they cut down this old dead rotted pine tree right here. And I quickly found my answer when I was cutting it up to move it. This tree is solid Fatlighter. So I know some people don't know what Fatlighter is, but that's the heart of the pine tree where all the resins and everything are. And it makes this wood extremely dense and heavy, but also very flammable. All the resins in there, very flammable. And it also has a really distinctive smell. So people use Fatlighter for starting fires. Also, a lot of the old houses that we see around here were built out of pine that has now turned into Fatlighter. And it's some of the hardest wood you'll see that you can, barely even drive a nail into some of it because it's such a dense wood, especially the old longleaf, which I don't think that is. It could be. I don't know if this was a young longleaf or not. Maybe a tree expert could tell me. Look at the rings on it. It wasn't a very old tree, I don't guess. But anyway, I've never seen this much of a Fatlighter tree, but it may be because this tree never laid down on the ground until they cut it. It was just standing. So it gave the opportunity for all the resins in the tree to dry out and become Fatlighter. There's the stump of the tree. And then of course they cut this tree down with this one actually hung up in that tree that they just cut down. They cut this one down last year, and the log from this tree was hung in the branches of that tree, and it was hanging over Miss Jenny's grave, and I was really worried it was going to fall on her grave, but it didn't. It fell right behind it. So over on the other side of the stuff I just cleared, we've got a bunch of graves. Now these are graves that I actually had to fix before because they skidded logs through here and displaced all of these headstones. In fact, some of them are still kind of leaned over. We'll probably need to come in here and fix those soon on one of the next trips out here when we start really resetting these stones. You can also see there's an indention over there, and there are graves all throughout here. There's one right here I can visibly see. And then over here there's a stone somewhere. I know there's one there, but I thought there was another one. It could be. It blends into the ground very easily. So that's where we're at right now. I'm not going to cut any more of this Fatlighter tree at the moment because it's dulling my saw and killing the battery very quickly. Like I said, it's really hard, dense wood there. And I'll show you another tree that they've staged to get out of here. And the shame about this is just a deadfall cedar tree. They didn't actually cut this one down. This one just died and fell. But they drug it out to the road here. Didn't take it, but have it here staged to come back and get. And then of course there's still all manner of destruction all throughout there. This is a definitely not a project that can be accomplished in a day out here. And there's graves all throughout there too. One of my other missions while we're doing this and trying to repair the cemetery, I want to go ahead and catalog all of the graves out here, clean off all the graves again. We did it before the first time I filmed the cemetery, which is several years ago now. We cleaned off all the graves. But of course, you know, if they go unmaintained, they're going to cover back up. So I want to do that, catalog all the graves, and just, you know, tidy up the cemetery a little bit, and of course clean all the destruction up too. Now another thing I do want to say is, if you saw the video where we talked about Bud Horton, and I think it's relevant because Jenny Horton is buried here. Bud Horton's people, his family, did not believe in returning to a cemetery after their loved one died. They believed in leaving their grief at the cemetery. And when Dan talked to Bud Horton about this, he said that it was a tradition that they had brought over from the old country, meaning Africa, that their family had. And I believe the subject came up when Dan asked Bud Horton where his mother was buried. And I believe she's either buried here or at the Marshall Cemetery, which is another cemetery that we need to check on. I believe it's at the Marshall Cemetery. And Dan asked Bud Horton, if his mother had a headstone. And Bud Horton said, "Oh no, we don't do that," and then explained that. Now, of course, that does not mean that all of the people out here had that same belief. That was, of course, their belief, and that was a tradition that they had carried over probably for many generations of leaving your grief at the cemetery. So you do have to take something like that into account when you see a place like this. And you want to respect people's beliefs and traditions with a cemetery like this. They may want it to return back to nature, and that was their belief. They left their grief at the cemetery. They never went back and just wanted it to return to nature, the person to return to nature. And their grave may not have even been marked, or if it was just with a fieldstone. So that's a tradition that you want to respect, because we don't know what these people's individual traditions were when it comes to a grave. But one thing that I can definitely say, they would not have wanted, the vandalism to happen out here. So that's why, primarily focused on cleaning this up whereas I normally wouldn't, come out here and do that. We would, because for one, the cemetery was in really good shape as it was. And secondly, it may have been, some of these families' traditions like that, others maybe not. The other thing that you have to take into account when you see this and consider a cemetery abandoned, which of course it never really is, but when you see a cemetery as abandoned, most people don't visit their great-grandparents' grave. We only visit the graves of the people that we knew when we were alive. So the people who knew, most of the people in here have either moved off, or their descendants have moved off, or the people who actually knew the people that are buried here have passed away themselves. There may be there's a few relatively newer graves out here, but still, when you have that, as it goes down in the generations, people are going to visit these graves less and less. The biggest thing that we're charged with is preserving this as a cemetery, because this is a very historic place. It began as a burial ground for the enslaved, and their descendants continued burying here. And that, aside from it just being a cemetery, that alone makes this very sacred ground and an important historic place that needs to be preserved. And of course, this right here that we see in the cemetery is just destruction. Terrible, terrible destruction, and such a shame. So since my saw is getting dull, and I don't know how much more battery I have left. Yeah, we're running a little bit low on battery. One thing that I do want to do is see if I can't cut through this dropped cedar tree over here that they're planning on coming back for. because I don't want to leave them anything. Like I said earlier, I don't want them to be able to profit any more on the destruction of this cemetery. I also have to say, from a power tool point of view, electric chainsaws have come a long way. I remember when an electric chainsaw was just a joke, but this one has been phenomenal out here. We'll see how it does with this. Definitely gonna have to sharpen the blade. Wow, blade's not as dull as I thought it was. It's just that Fatlighter tree is so dense. Oh, come on. Trying to get it to go ahead and break in half. Don't want to saw all the way and hit the dirt. I gotta get me one of these. I'm just borrowing this one from a friend, but this is incredible saw. All right. Come on, roll over. There we go. All right, got that nice and ruined for them. Although it looks like the center was kind of rotted out anyway, but they won't be able to come in here and make any profit off this now. There was an old fence that ran across the street at one time. See the staple right there? See, you know, even something like this tells a story about this place and the land that surrounds it. But it's still pretty heavy. There's more. This old fence that used to run through this tree right there that's still intact. All right, so now I want to go over here and cut up this cedar tree that they left by the road, even if I don't drag it all the way through the cemetery today, because I'm getting kind of worn out. Still, you know, you don't want to leave them with anything that they can use out here. They've got some more stuff staged over there that hopefully I can either get buried under a pile of limbs or destroyed where they can't use it on one of these trips pretty soon. All right, hopefully that has made that useless. They seem to be taking, you know, pretty long sections of these cedars out. And then they've got this kind of live edge right here set aside. So I'm going to run the saw through that. Okay, so hopefully this has rendered these pieces kind of useless to them. I'm going to come back and chop them up smaller when I sharpen the blade and have more saw battery life. And then we're going to try to tackle through all of this too and try to get it out of here, because there's a lot of graves all throughout there. See some of the headstones in there already. So I'm going to pack up here today, but we're going to go and check on the old Marshall Cemetery. This cemetery is another very good example of a well-preserved cemetery that began as burial ground for the enslaved, and some descendants continue to use as well. There are very, very little markings out in this cemetery, not even field stones for a lot of the graves, just rows and rows and rows of indentions. See one there, and then another one, and there's probably 100 graves out here, but almost none have any field stones on them or any marking at all other than the indention in the ground. There are a few that have field stones, but the majority do not. And this may be an example of what Bud Horton was talking about, leaving your grief at the cemetery and not coming back. And for example, when Dan asked if his mother's grave was marked and he said, no, we don't do that, that may explain why there's very little markings in this cemetery. Or it could be that if most of them, if the majority of them are burials of the enslaved, they weren't allowed to have markings on the cemetery. The stones weren't available for them to mark them. We don't know. It's all really conjecture at this point. But I wanted to check on this cemetery. This is another one that has a bunch of older growth trees in it, but not quite the same as the Mahone-Ingram Cemetery that we visited. And I don't see any destruction out here. Someone is specifically targeting the Mahone-Ingram Cemetery, but as I said before, we don't want it to turn into a serial case where a bunch of cemeteries are getting vandalized like that and destroyed. There have been some storm damage out here. These trees have, of course, naturally fallen. And I was actually looking for the row of marked graves, which are over here. See, up on the hill is going to be your older part of the cemetery, and up there are going to be most of where the enslaved people are buried. And then as time went on and the cemetery grew out this way, you get different style of burials, a bunch of marked graves with field stones. Those can be seen here. You can see the field stones sticking up. I also want to point out the dead cedar tree here. We've been in a lot of these old cemeteries. Of course, cedars are very common in cemeteries. We've been in a lot of them that have dead cedar trees in them. So it's always a shame when there were living cedar trees that were cut down, like at the Mahone-Ingram Cemetery. So this is a father and a son buried here. This is Marshall Jr. He died August 9th, 1917. And his father is here. Marshall. He died February 10th, 1915. It says at rest on his grave. So Marshall Jr. and his father, Marshall. And I've always been intrigued by that because I just think that's such a great name, Marshall. All right, everybody. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this video today. Not the best subject in the world, dealing with these vandalized cemeteries, but we're trying to rectify that. And there's something I wanted to make a note of, and it's the fact that you may see this cemetery vandalism today, this tree thieving from the cemeteries that we're witnessing now. And you may think something like, in 2024 people have lost all respect for cemeteries, that sort of thing. But this tree thieving from cemeteries, this is not a new thing. This actually used to be more common. And I know of several old cemeteries that you can see the remains of old cedar trees that were cut down. And of course, back when logging operations were, different than they are today, loggers would just go through an old cemetery and damage it. So you see, historic damage like that, and also historic thieving from old cemeteries. So it's not a new thing, but it is a big shame that it's still happening today, and so blatantly. So I hope you've enjoyed this video. Totally different kind of video, I think, but not a great subject, dealing with vandalized cemeteries. But we'll be back to continue to work on the Mahone-Ingram Cemetery until we get it as cleaned up as we can. Hopefully we catch the people doing it. I'm crossing my fingers on that. I'd love nothing more than to be able to get them the justice that they deserve, or get justice for the cemetery. And it's a real shame. So stay tuned, and we'll see you next time.